President Trump could have a second summit next month with Vladimir Putin in Paris. Trump's top national security advisor revealed that an Armistice Day celebration that both leaders are attending at the beginning of November is the possible site of their next in-person discussion. We could also see a fuller meeting like Helsinki somewhere else as well, John Bolton said during a trip to Moscow to meet with Putin. Putin specifically recommended Paris for the conversation as he sat down with Bolton on Tuesday, the Associated Press reported. The U.S. had said that Trump wanted to meet with Putin again, but only after the midterm elections had concluded. News that the two sides are pushing ahead followed Trump's announcement this week that he was pulling the U.S. out of a Cold War nuclear treaty with the Kremlin. Just last week, the U.S. also accused a Russian operative of meddling in the 2018 election. Still, Bolton told Kommersant, a Russian newspaper, before his meeting with Putin in Moscow, that he laid out what some of the possibilities were for a second summit on Monday. According to Radio Free Europe, Bolton told the Russian paper that Nikolai Patrushev, his Kremlin counterpart, said he would report the offer to Putin. "I won't step on President Putin's decision, but perhaps he'll have something to say in the near future," Bolton described the Kremlin official as having said. The G20 summit in Buenos Aires in November was also discussed as a possible rendezvous point. As Bolton was meeting with Putin on Tuesday, the Associated Press and Reuters reporters that Putin had his eye on Paris. Bolton reportedly told Putin in response that the president looks forward to seeing him at the November 11 event celebrating the end of World War I. The event has taken on new significance in light of the president's promise to drop out of the Intermediate-Range Nuclear Forces Treaty over Russia's failed compliance. Trump vowed on Monday that U.S. would keep adding to its nuclear arsenal until people come to their senses. In remarks he directly pointed at Russia and China. Trump made his comments Monday after saying over the weekend he would seek to withdraw the U.S. from the Intermediate-Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, the Reagan-era pact that got mid-range nukes out of Europe. He also lashed at nuclear powers Russia and China and cast his move in highly personal terms, saying at one point, "You can't play that game on me. Until people come to their senses, we will build it up," Trump told reporters outside the White House Monday afternoon, before taking off to a campaign rally in Texas. "Until people come to their senses," he repeated. "Russia has not adhered to the agreement. This should have been done years ago," Trump said of his decision, which still requires Senate approval. "Until people come to their senses, we have more money than anybody else by far," Trump said, flexing the U.S. military and economic muscle. Share this article. Share. We will build it up until they come to their senses. When they do, then we'll all be smart and we'll all stop," Trump continued. "And we'll, and by the way, not only stop, we'll reduce, which I would love to do. But right now, they have not adhered to the agreement," he said of Russia. Trump said Saturday the U.S. was withdrawing because Russia hadn't honored the pact. Asked if his statement should be taken as a threat to Russian President Vladimir Putin, Trump responded, "It's a threat to whoever you want, and it includes China, and it includes Russia, and anybody else who wants to play that game," Trump said. Describing the decision in personal terms, Trump said, "You can't do that, you can't play that game on me. until they get smart, they have not adhered to the spirit of that agreement itself. Russia. Trump noted that China is not included in the agreement. It isn't a signatory. They should be included in the agreement, Trump said. Until they get smart, there will be nobody even close to us, he warned. Trump also acknowledged he didn't speak to Russian President Vladimir Putin about his decision. "I have not. I don't have to. I'm terminating the agreement," Trump said. "Because they violated the agreement. I'm terminating the agreement." Russia has responded to Trump's threat to pull out, saying, "We need to hear the American side's explanation on this issue." Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov added, scrapping the treaty forces Russia to take steps for its own security. Mikhail Gorbachev, who helped hammer out the pact, warned pulling out risks life on the planet. Gorbachev, 87, said Trump was showing a lack of wisdom. "Do they really not understand in Washington what this could lead to?" he asked. "Is it really so hard to understand that dropping these agreements shows a lack of wisdom? Getting rid of the treaty is a mistake. All the agreements aimed at nuclear disarmament and limitation of nuclear arms must be preserved to save life on Earth." On Saturday, Trump said Washington would withdraw from a landmark Cold War-era treaty that eliminated nuclear missiles from Europe because Russia was violating the pact, triggering a warning of retaliatory measures from Moscow. The Intermediate-Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, negotiated by then-President Ronald Reagan and Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev in 1987, required the elimination of short-range and intermediate-range nuclear and conventional missiles by both countries. Russia has not, unfortunately, honored the agreement, so we're going to terminate the agreement, and we're going to pull out, Trump told reporters on Saturday after a rally in Nevada. Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov said on Sunday that a unilateral withdrawal by the United States would be very dangerous and lead to a military technical retaliation. Gorbachev, now a frail 87-year-old, said it would be a mistake for Washington to quit the treaty, and it would undermine work he and U.S. counterparts did to end the Cold War arms race. Do they really not understand in Washington what this could lead to? Interfax news agency quoted Gorbachev as saying. A Kremlin spokesman said Russian President Vladimir Putin would seek answers about the planned withdrawal when he meets John Bolton, Trump's national security advisor, for scheduled talks in Moscow this week. U.S. authorities believe Moscow is developing and has deployed a ground-launched system in breach of the INF Treaty that could allow it to launch a nuclear strike on Europe at short notice. Russia has consistently denied any such violation. Trump said the United States will develop the weapons unless Russia and China agree to a halt on development. China is not a party to the treaty. European Battlegrounds Arms Control Accord, signed by Reagan and Gorbachev in a ceremony at the White House, bans land-based medium-range nuclear missiles capable of hitting Europe or Alaska. It ended a Cold War-era crisis when the Soviet Union installed nearly 400 nuclear warheads pointed at Western Europe. The United States had responded by stationing Pershing and cruise missiles in Europe. But this provoked a wave of protests from anti-nuclear campaigners who felt the deployment turned Europe into a potential nuclear battleground. In the early 1980s, hundreds of thousands of protesters gathered in Bonn, West Germany, and campaigners formed a protest camp at Greenham Common, in Britain, the site of cruise missiles. Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Ryabkov, in comments reported by state-controlled RIA news agency, said if the United States withdrew, Russia would have no choice but to retaliate, including taking unspecified measures of a military technical nature. But we would rather things did not get that far, RIA quoted him as saying. TASS news agency quoted him as saying withdrawal would be a very dangerous step, and it was Washington, and not Moscow, that was failing to comply with the treaty. He said the Trump administration was using the treaty in an attempt to blackmail the Kremlin, putting global security at risk. We will, of course, accept no ultimatums or blackmail methods, Interfax quoted him as saying. Asked about Trump's comments in Beijing on Monday, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Hua Chunying said a unilateral withdrawal would have a negative impact on many sides. She urged the United States to prudently handle the issue and to think thrice before acting. What needs to be stressed is that talking about China on the issue of unilaterally pulling out of the treaty is completely mistaken, she said. British Defence Minister Gavin Williamson, in comments reported by the Financial Times, said London stood resolute behind Washington over the issue, and that the Kremlin was making a mockery of the agreement.